So I'd love to introduce you to Kate Uhry. I met Kate through a mutual friend, and it's been a wonderful experience. She's helped us on our marketing in terms of getting our lead gen together and different things like that. And she is now a member of HAYVN. So welcome, Kate. And I'm going to let you detail and get into more information about what you're going to present today.
Thank you.
I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks.
Okay.
First of all, I would love to record this. Does anyone object to me recording the webinar? Thank you.
Did you already start?
Yeah. I did start, yes.
Okay.
So one of the things I would tell you as my first piece, I'm doing, as you guys know, I'm doing this webinar on making the most of a webinar when you don't have a budget and you really need to you really want to use a webinar as a lead gen tool. And the first thing I would tell you is, for God's sake, don't forget to record the webinar, because this webinar is then going to be used in various ways to then move around and use as promotion. So don't forget to promote your webinar, record your webinar. So I'm going to start. Let me just make sure you get down here. Okay. So I'm assuming everything's working. If it stops working, let me know, because I can't see you right now. So just to give you guys a quick introduction, my name is Kate Uhry, and let's see. Can you guys see my screen? No. Yes, maybe?
Yes, you're good. You're good.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thanks. Sorry. Because I'm sitting here now thinking, can I actually move it forward? There we go. So before I jump into the elements, the 5 elements, there were 3 when I started this, but now there are 5. Before I go through and start this, I just wanted to let you guys know that chances are I've been in your shoes. I've been a small business owner. I've worked for small business owners who have no budget, no marketing budget, budgets on a shoestring. And so the goal behind this webinar is to share with you ideas for taking a webinar and leveraging it in such a way that you can actually get a lot of press out of it and use it way beyond the actual webinar itself. So while I'm presenting to all 15 of you, and you could all, potentially be clients in this scenario, the idea would be that I could take the webinar recording and then use it in a bunch of different ways, so that just beyond the 15 participants, there would be other people who might see the webinar and I could use it in other ways. So the 5 elements, first of all, I'm just going to go quickly over what makes a great webinar. I don't know how many of you have been watching Some Good News with John Krasinski. It's basically his response to the horrible news for COVID-19, because he just does all sorts of feel-good stuff. But it has 5 elements that I absolutely love that I would ask you to consider putting into a good webinar. It has a ton of informality. I mean, the guy is literally just sitting in his living room with 2 cameras talking to the screen. It has a snappy title. If you hear Some Good News, you know exactly what he's talking about. It has a very strong point of view in that he has a very direct focus, and he only talks about good news that has happened from episode to episode. He has a good handle on who's watching it. He knows his audience really well, and he talks to his audience. So from episode to episode, he will respond to viewers and get them involved. In this particular case, he had this woman who is Polish and who had submitted a recipe for pierogi, talking to Martha Stewart, who is Polish as well. And so Martha actually made the recipe that this woman had submitted. And so it was this, he didn't actually do anything. He just put the 2 of them together. And so the last bit about this great webinar that I wanted to share with you is to come up with, for your webinar, a great guest speaker. And it doesn't have to be formal. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know Martha. And I don't know, obviously it's kind of hard to get, unless you happen to be like an actor, to get someone with that amount of credibility. But one of the things that I'm finding is really helpful is if you don't, so when you're hosting your webinar, and sorry, let me back up a bit. The way I'm thinking about your webinar is not necessarily a PowerPoint like I'm doing, but more of an interview type scenario. So that all you have to do is find somebody who's influential in your field who you could interview, sit down and just talk to. So David, I know you have a co-working space. Find somebody who is extraordinarily influential, like, I don't know, is like a part of the SBA or something like that, the Small Business Administration. Now, I know necessarily you don't know somebody at the SBA, but maybe you know somebody who could speak. Or you have somebody in your LinkedIn connections who might know somebody who could have, like, speak on a very relevant topic. So when you're thinking about your webinar and you're thinking, okay, I need to interview a guest speaker, someone who's very influential, somebody who people are going to want to come to see, and let that be sort of the celebrity draw. Don't just think about your own connections. Think about people who know somebody, like maybe your mom knows somebody, or maybe your sister knows somebody, things like that, and think outside of the box. But the goal is to be able to find somebody who will really resonate and draw the right audience. So you could even like just send out a general, I'm looking for an expert message. So once you find your person, then you're going to promote the heck out of the webinar before it even happens. So that would be done through emails, social media. In fact, I even heard yesterday that someone was, as they were connecting with people on LinkedIn, they were just dropping in the fact that like they were hosting a webinar series as part of that LinkedIn connection. And the most important thing is if you find a guest with gravitas, then use them. Ask them to promote it to their colleagues at work, ask them to send it out to their own network. And you can pretty much double the amount of people who will come if you use your guests networking. So a couple things not to forget before your webinar. And again, this isn't like how to host a webinar, I realize that, but it's just to tee it up for you guys. So don't forget to send out questions beforehand, leave time for a Q&A at the end. Go over the format of the webinar if you are co-hosting with someone like Felicia did with me before this one. And finally, that big thing, make sure you hit record. I'm checking the chat, but does anyone have any quick questions on what I've covered so far? Okay, moving on. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to host the webinar. And yes, that is a guest appearance by Michael Rednick for all of you who have met him at HAYVN. So once you've recorded your webinar, there's a couple ways that you can leverage it. First of all, we were very lucky at Veliku, and Veliku is a HAYVN co-working partner, or they're members at HAYVN. So if you've met Michael or Janet, I work with Michael, so I'm pulling a lot of my demonstrations from him with his permission. I just wanted to let you go. So the way to record it. So once you've recorded the webinar, what we've been doing and what I would recommend you do is you send a recording of the webinar to those people who attended. And then you send a recording of the webinar to people who signed up but didn't attend. So usually what we'll do is we'll go through the webinar and make sure that it's trimmed on either end, so the introductions are trimmed out and it's more like a presentation, but really tight. So you want to make sure that all of the extraneous stuff is come out. And then usually it's good to do something like this slide here, in that you actually can share what it was, a little click through to say watch it on demand, and then also the guest speaker. Again, in this particular case, this was these people were very high profile. And so that was a lot of the draw, and to have their pictures on the ad was really important. And then finally, make sure you send that recording out to people who you invited but didn't end up registering for it. Maybe they just didn't have the time that day, or they missed the email, or whatever it was. But make sure that you send it out to them as well, so that there's plenty of opportunity for people to watch it after the fact. The other places you can put the recording of the webinar is onto your website, so that it's part of the evergreen content, and also onto a YouTube channel should you happen to have it. But it's a great place to just, the same way HAYVN's doing here, is just to have a whole bunch of, webinars on their YouTube channel, so that if you watch one, it's really easy to just keep going through and binge watch a whole bunch of HAYVN webinars. The other place you can use the video is on your blog. I mean, first of all, on your website. So HAYVN has that YouTube channel set up where there's a whole bunch of them. One of my former clients actually has a whole bunch of videos set up on a page on their website. They have patient stories. They're a spinal surgeon, so they have a bunch of patient stories, but they also have like a whole 360 walkthrough of what their place looks like, because they have people who come from out of town. The other thing that they did was they broke the video into little snippets. And when they did that, we were able to do sort of a frequently asked question type of thing. So they had this whole webinar on, like, say, wound care, like for people who are recovering from surgery, should they use ice or heat on the swelling afterwards? And so what they did was they did a FAQ blog where it was kind of like, here are some of the things that we hear over and over from our patients. And they use these little video snippets within that blog. So it was a blog on the website. And what's good about that from a marketing standpoint is if people Google, how do I recover from surgery, this might come up as one of those searches, which is huge for anyone who has a website. The other way you can leverage little snippets of the video is to actually like post onto Twitter and include like little snippets of the video. Like I would recommend like 30 seconds, no more. And this way you can give them little teasers, and if they like what they hear, they might click through and actually want to watch the whole rest of the webinar. You can also pull quotes. That's one of the other things I found. Sometimes there are real gems that happen in webinars, and you can pull out a quote and use that as the teaser. Okay. Speaking of social media, so there's a bunch of different ways we can do this. First of all, you should have a pretty good idea of where most of your people are living. Are they on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter? One of the two, or one of the three. Instagram also, if you're more commercial, right? So you can drop it in and just say like, hey, watch my video on demand, and just put a link to that video that's on your website, because the idea is to draw them to the website and drive web traffic, right? You can put those little teaser snippets like I had on the slide before. You can do the quotes, or you can do a short clip of just one answer, like, what are the 5 things that make up a great webinar? That would be a good teaser social media post. The other way, again, I'm sorry, it's all kind of interwoven, but again, repeating, the other thing you can do on the website, besides, you can actually physically put a quote from the webinar onto your website. A lot of times we'll have a content page, and as a way of drawing people in, if you found like a fabulous quote from one of your webinars, you can pull it in, and it's again acts as sort of the teaser for people to come through, rather than having a full-blown descriptor of what happened during the webinar. You can just put a little quote in, and people will be like, wow, those are the kind of things that people said on that webinar. I want to watch this. So that's the kind of thing. And again, you could create a frequently asked questions section from your webinar, or you could create just a content section on the, on the website of all the videos that you have. I realize I'm going very quickly, but I'm keenly aware of the fact that like I only have 20 minutes. We will pause for questions. So one of the other things you can do is create a blog post. This is a slide that is completely out of order, so I will be showing you that in another place. But when you do a slide for a blog, sorry, I apologize. When you do a blog post, you can actually sit and say, okay, you know what? We had a webinar. You mentioned your co-hosts. You talk about what you talked about. You can put a little quote, which is that thing over to the right. And then I would absolutely call out in a blog anybody who came and backlink it, so that all of these links that I have highlighted here will allow you, from an SEO perspective or from a Google search perspective, allow you to be found on your website, because the person here will understand that you mentioned her, and she might backlink, and somewhere on Pepsi's website, we might actually have a link back to our blog. So linking, quoting, and making sure that you mention the expert panelists who came to your webinar. So how are you going to get customers from doing this method of marketing? My friend Michael says, the big aha is that one promotion or one step isn't the thing that's going to get you the customers. This method works because it's holistic. You are doing social media, you're doing blog posts, you're putting things on the website, you're putting things on a YouTube channel. You don't know what's going to resonate with a particular person, but somebody might see something and become one of your clients or become a lead or start to get interested in your company itself. So before I move on, I realize I just blasted through all of that. I'm going to move on to the cost of what this is for you guys, but I realized that I just went through like marketing 501 in about 5 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Crickets. Oh, guys.
Can I ask one? Sorry.
Of course,
What are you what are you using to edit your videos?
So we have used,
Or trim them as you suggested?
yeah, no, a couple things. So for a Zoom webinar, once it's recorded, you can actually go in and I think there's a trim section on either side. I've also used Vidyard, and there's a way to trim. You can kind of like cut it in on either side. I don't think you can actually cut out parts in the middle. A Mac is really easy. If you know anyone with a Mac, like they just make it simple. I don't know other than that. I think I've also used Windows Media to trim it, like the, you know, the Windows stuff that's just right on your PC.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Cool. Okay. And again, I realize I blasted through. If you guys have any questions about any of this stuff afterwards, just ping me. I put my contact information into the chat. So finally, what is this going to cost you? Nothing but time. It's going to take time to do this. Like, so one of the downsides, if you don't have a marketing budget, is the fact that this will take time to do. You have to find a co-host if you're using one. You need to create the event either in Eventbrite or on Zoom or whatever and set up a registration page. You're going to have to write emails, write social media. And one of the things you should be doing is monitoring who's coming into your webinar, because you can end up tailoring, depending on the questions you ask as they register, you can tailor your webinar to the people who are coming in. And you can even ask questions beforehand. So if somebody asks a very specific question, you can say, hey, Martha, you know, so-and-so asked that, you know, about your pierogies. And then, you know, specifically, she could answer that question beforehand. What's it going to cost to hold the webinar? This is Vidyard, by the way, a little snippet from Vidyard. The only thing it should cost you is just the cost to host the webinar. And Zoom is like $15 a month for anybody over like 2 people. There's GoToWebinar, there's GoToMeetings, and then the video editing program. And to your point, it's usually part of Windows or a Mac. Like, I don't think you have to pay for it. And then you're just gonna need a little chutzpah, because it's really hard to do a webinar without checking your ego at the door. The good news is that things have gotten so much more informal that it's almost like talking to a group of friends. And the other thing is, like, what is it going to cost you afterwards? So not hosting the webinar, but what will it cost you afterwards? It really depends on whether or not you're doing a lot of this yourself or whether you're hiring someone. So if you hire a marketer to write your promotions, or you hire someone to write your blog, or you hire a writer, it can get more expensive. You can do it, of course, for yourself for free. And even creating those graphic design elements that I mentioned earlier, you can do that on Canva. Now, grant you, I did this one over here and I think it's absolutely horrible. I'm not a graphic designer by any means. but Canva is free and they have a lot of templates, and you can cobble something together that's perfectly acceptable on social media, for social media. And then finally, I'm a big believer in a thank you gift for, especially if this is somebody you don't know well that you're interviewing and has agreed to come on, and you know they're fairly famous in your field or your industry. Always send a thank you gift of something. So it will cost you whatever that thank you gift costs. So on the low end, I would say $15 maybe plus the cost of a gift. And on the high end, it will cost you maybe $500 or more, depending on the cost of a marketing writing team. You know, it just depends on what you're outsourcing. In terms of time, it's about 15 hours if you do everything yourself. Is it worth it? I think so. And I'm going to tell you a story. So we, because I think we have time. If you're looking for a way to get noticed, this is a great way to get noticed. I've been doing a webinar series with Michael, and they have used their influence to pull in some of the biggest names in the industry, from people like Pepsi and IBM and MasterCard. And for communicators, for people who are in the HR field, the fact that we were able to find these people is just huge. And we've had an amazing turnout on the webinars. But more importantly, because we've made it available afterwards and people have been able to share the webinar with their colleagues after, we've actually gotten a few leads out of it, where people have said, you know what, this was a fabulous webinar. You guys obviously know what you're doing. You're connecting with these experts. You must be in the field. We want to find out more about what you guys do. And that's really powerful. So again, just to sum up, if you start with the right webinar and you find someone who's an expert in your field, and you have an interview where you just basically ask them questions about what, you know, things that would resonate with your audience, make it informal, doesn't have to have PowerPoint, doesn't have to have like all of this fancy stuff that I just did. It can be very simple. If that's the case, then you guys actually have the potential afterwards to just share it around, and it really can go far. It really can. It's incredibly powerful. Oop, I've noticed now that I've stopped sharing that there's tons of chats. Oh, sorry, Anne, she had to run. I didn't see any other questions. Was there anybody, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any, I mean, I think we're at 12:30, so if you guys have to go, we got it.
I had a question, Kate, just about the webinars, because you were saying it doesn't cost anything, but I had looked at doing Zoom, the platform like we're doing now, versus Zoom webinar, and that was like $40 a month. And I noticed for Michael's, I think that's what you used, was a Zoom webinar. Am I right?
Right. I'm sorry, because again, it depends on what your the level of what you need. So there's Zoom meetings versus Zoom webinars, and they're different price points. So it really depends on what you guys are wanting to do. But yes, Felicia, you're absolutely correct. Zoom webinars is a higher price point than just having the ability of flat out having a meeting, having meetings that you record for more than, you know, 2 or 3 participants.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask another question? Sorry.
No, please feel free. It was like, you guys, it was like talking to a blind, it was very disconcerting.
So when you're first starting out with these, where is the best, and if you don't have a really strong email list right now,
Right.
Where is the best place to kind of start getting out there to, obviously the webinar, if you put it out there and, you know, you're asking people to sign up or whatever, you're going to start organically building that. What is the fastest way in your estimation to build that email list organically?
If you're a B2B, are you B2B or B2C?
No, B2C.
Ah, okay.
Well,
So,
a little bit of, I have weird. I work with schools, but I also work with, but my primary product is purchased by the students.
Got it. So if you were B2B, which is my background, I would encourage you to use LinkedIn. One of the beauties of the connections is that you can, like, all the people who you ask to connect, you can invite to the webinar. And then it's amazing how many people have their emails as part of their contacts on LinkedIn. So you can literally like develop your, it's organic. I mean, it's not fast by any means, but just by asking for those connections, and because they know. So for B2C, I think really like Facebook is going to be your friend. I hate to, I know, and I'm sorry.
I know. But
And
I get it. That's kind of where I've been in Twitter and
yeah, no, all I can say is whatever you do, don't rent a list, because that's spamming.
yeah.
But it's really going to be one of those like get the word out kind of things. And if you have advocates, you remember those, for a hot moment, Google had those like Google circles. That's not what they were called, but like they had this thing where like somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. And I think just getting the word out and asking people to get the word out for you is really, by Amy, was really big, Because I'm sorry, I wish I was more in the B2C world.
Yeah, no, it is a challenge, B2C. B2B is a little bit different like that. B2C is a little bit more challenging. And so thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Does anyone else have any questions about this? I guess the question I think I have for you guys is raise your hand if you're thinking about doing a webinar. Ooh, Cynthia, awesome. Oh, good, Andrea. Okay, and all of the hands. All the hands. If I just say Anne, I think it actually hits like most of you. Sorry. That's awesome. If you guys have any questions going into that webinar, feel free to just shoot me an email. Or if you want, just sort of like, hey, this is what I was thinking about. Here's the cadence or whatever. Just, let me know. I'm here to help. I mean, one of the things about Felicia, and you guys all know this, is that we really are, thanks Lisa, we really are a community here at HAYVN, and we are here to help each other. We're all small businesses, so please feel free to reach out. Right, Felicia, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you all for coming today. We're still here to chat. Kate, this was really wonderful. I wrote a bunch of notes down of things that I'm not doing with HAYVN halftime at this point that I need to
I actually wrote this webinar for you, Felicia.
Okay.
I really did.
I've been it's very much, it's like, and probably all you feeling this too, as a small business owner, you're like, okay, I can only do so much. And I think every time I sit through what I say, if I can just do like one of the things that you mentioned, I'll be, I'll get myself a little further along, but thank you. And like I said, Kate is phenomenal in terms of a marketing genius, and I hope once we open again, she'll be in our space a lot more. And she's helped me. She's a HubSpot guru and has helped like with all the CRM systems and things like that. So hopefully you'll get to know her more when we get
back. I now have my, I have my membership, which is awesome.
Yeah, there we go.
Thanks, Anne. Does anyone else have any questions or like?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share a little experience that we had. It wasn't necessarily like a webinar where we had a lot of people, it wasn't like a live event, but we did have an artist talk that we recorded just between like a mediator and an artist with a PowerPoint. And I just wanted to say that there's a few things just really important to get right so that once you do post it, it's something, you want the production value to be. Obviously, we're all, not professionals here, but you do want it to be something that's decent that people are going to watch. So, just like the lighting, which I'm in very bad lighting right now, but, that you have the people sitting in and so we had somebody record it that he took a stab at it and he did a great job. It was, it was okay. But then we did have to find a post-production guy who knew what he was doing to use iMovie and clean it up and make it a little bit more. And that does cost. Like he did the first one for free, but the second one, I think we paying him $100, even though, that's like a quarter of his normal fee. So I just wanted to put that out there because not all the quality is you know, created equal, and you do want to have something that you're going to be proud to put on there and for people to, you know, watch repeatedly.
Although I would argue, and what we're finding is that as people are getting more used to Zoom meetings and the informality of having virtual backgrounds and having poor lighting and everybody working from home, that the expectation of a professional video and a professional video snippet is sort of going by the wayside. And so one of the things that, oh, thanks, David, is that one of the things that I would say is that you can actually, depending on your audience, of course, but like, you can actually get away now with something a lot more candid than you used to.
Mhm.
And that you don't necessarily have to have that uber professional video clip that we used to expect.
Right.
We were saying that in one of our webinars recently, that the fact that you're actually invited into people's homes and that you are used to now dealing with children walking behind, or, you know, my cats are locked away, but like if a cat tail like came walking across, it's a lot, the expectations are lower, and it allows you to speed things up when it comes to like delivery. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. A good video
Well,
editing.
I mean, to just make an effort to at least, you know, eliminate what you can control, and then the rest of it, you know.
David, why don't you talk? Stop typing.
I was going to say one thing while he's unmuting himself, I think what I've learned is sound is still very important, the microphone, and so because people aren't going to have the patience to sit and listen, and probably good internet too, to make sure
Yeah,
that
freezing
don't
is
stop.
not cool.
So any recommendations on microphones from your podcast studio or whatever you're using now?
We had a recommendation from Amy who did the podcasting session, so I can look that up. But,
Super.
David, what's your opinion? Are you leaning more towards Andrea's like be super professional, or are you?
No, well, I just think.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Andrea. I apologize. That was unfair.
No,
I'm putting words into her mouth.
we've gotten, you know, this whole thing has sort of gotten us accustomed to maybe a different level of professionalism in the communication, not the communication itself, but the medium, right? So in a lot of ways, we're all more comfortable with a much less produced product, and we don't necessarily associate a lower level of production with a lower level of quality of information. You know, when Al Roker is doing his thing from his backyard with an iPhone and an iPad, you know, we can too, right? So I think we're now enabled to use these tools and a little more cheaply, a little more simply. You know, the important thing is the content. Get it out there, as opposed to the production. I was even thinking of you know, thoughts we had for a panel up here that, you know, we wanted to talk about, you know, pick a topic and you want to have panel speakers. I was thinking of having a Boston speaker come all the way out here. That's maybe a 4-hour trip.
he's in Saratoga. Right?
Yeah, but that's no longer necessary, right? I could have a local speaker right next to a screen or a recording in real time of somebody from Boston, which simplifies the whole thing, right? I mean, now I don't have to get an entire day and a half of somebody from Boston's time. Even if I could get it cheap, it would still be a huge investment in that person's time, a big favor.
Absolutely.
Now we can just Zoom him in and be an expert to debate with the guy on stage and the other lady that's from, you know, from a little bit south of here in Saratoga. You know, it just enables a lot of things, you know, that we're just more comfortable with it. I'm sorry if I went wrong there.
No, of course not.
Yeah. I mean, these online sessions, certainly, like, more people can attend these and when we're at HAYVN, because it's not the same thing, but like in terms of technology, I don't have to worry, like if their computer attaches to the presentation, that's super easy and we can record it and send it out. So, and then it's easier to, you know, if you guys can drop off or leave and it's not at any time and it's not rude. And there are some things about that, but you know, obviously it's not the same as being with someone. But
What to David's point, I think what I'm finding is that when there's a situation even like this, like let's say we were the panelists on a webinar, what we find is that people listen more, that it matters less about what my background is, but more about what people are saying. And I'm finding that it doesn't matter quite as much about, you know, the stage, like the surroundings and sort of the gravitas of the fact that you're like in a sound studio or you're on a stage or whatever. And so when you take that out of the equation and take the experience out of the equation and dial it into just what people are saying, it's very, it's been an interesting shift in how people are doing stuff. Like I'm less focused on the presentation. I'm more focused on what you're actually sharing with me. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of what I'm finding. But that's one of the reasons why the idea and sort of this aha moment that I had with what's been working is that if you find the right person to interview, all you have to do is ask the questions, but that the expert brings like so much weight. Like people are just like, oh, they're just so into like what the person's saying that if you find the right audience and you match them with the right expert in the field, it's such a powerful thing.